How would you like to start this? Not a podcast.
Start at the beginning.
Someone asked ChatGPT, what's the best way to intro a podcast, right? Okay, let's start with that beginning. Introduce yourself, what you do.
James Taylor.
I'm Deepak. James, I'm going to go back to you as a person. So, 10 years ago when you were a teenager, or 20 years ago when you were back in junior school? Did you always have an inquisitive mind?
Yes. And
what's your earliest memories? What you said yes so quickly. What reminds you of you?
I always wanted to know how things work. I remember, I think, getting my first computer. My first experience of a computer was playing asteroids on a word processor that my mum had brought home from work one time. But after that, a few years later, because I was about 8, 9, I started literally pulling computers apart just to see how they work and not necessarily to fix them, but just to understand the parts.
For those who've never, you didn't have a manual on the side, you were just taking it apart.
No, I literally took, manuals, no
YouTube tutorials available.
No YouTube tutorials, you don't read the manual.
So I'm getting a picture of a passionate person, right? Because that's something you do, not just because you're tinkering. You had a vision there. You wanted to get involved, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
So you've got this young inquisitive mind. It's still young. Your mind is, anyways. No, you've got a young inquisitive mind.
All that's left, yeah.
So let's pick up on those. So if most kids, when they're asked at school what they want to be, it's like a fireman, a policeman, or was there any inkling about where you might send yourself?
I had some random things when I was a child, or growing up. It was a pilot, joining the Merchant Navy. I even was thinking of applying to become an engineer with British Airways.
Oh wow!
As I was growing up, I ended up going into electronics engineering. My dad told me don't go into mechanical. That was his area. He was a biomedical engineer. I think it's probably because he found it hard work and he thought electronics was the future. So then I ended up in IT. So
amazing.
Yeah.
And 25 years you quote as a career, but you've got to a point where you're a subject matter expert. There's lots of them, so we don't have to put you on a pedestal. So you don't have to be shy of the fact that you come in and you see customers, you see people, you see problems from that childhood. So if you see problems from the mechanics of it, what about the people behind it? So where in your career did you start thinking, actually, there's more to just tinkering here? There's something bigger in that piece.
I think it's more about the inquisitive mind piece, and I think it's also the relationship. It's not just about knowing about how something works. It's the relationship and how you can provide value to something. It's a means to an end, and I like delving into the detail and resolving things, but it all stems from the fact that, why am I doing this? Where's the value in that? What you do in life should be meaningful, in my opinion. Trying to being philosophical about it, but I don't come to a job for a job. It's a career. It's a vocation. That's the way I view it. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you don't have the same opinion as your line management, and there's misalignment. But
this isn't a HR. This is not.
But I think you should want to be invested in what you're doing every day, particularly as you don't spend as much time with your family as you do at work. So yeah.
I think my kids told me the other day, goes, you do more work than you do parenting. I was like, I'm not sure. But then you said, it's your vocation, but if you hang around for something for 25 years, what made you sound like you needed value. So what is the value you're seeing in the role that you take around security?
I think it's pride, but it's not necessarily something I personally want to shout about. It's more about knowing that I've done a good enough job, at least, but hopefully a great job. And you can only strive to do your best. That's all you can do. Putting more hours in isn't always the answer. Getting help is often something that I do from a peer perspective. Colleagues are, fantastic. Teamwork is, I would say, the way in which you can change things and consistently develop things over time and have more, how can I put this, more value for the people you're working with, but also for the customer. The whole premise around having a partnership with your customer is important.
And now you're in your modern role.
Yeah.
Security, I mean, we could probably dig under that. Well, what does security mean to you? Why? I mean, I look at our brand new prop back here.
Yeah.
It's a global issue. What does security mean to you? Why does it keep you so excited?
It is a global issue, and it manifests itself in ways in which you don't always necessarily see firsthand. Most of the time that you can get through to people about security, because people just carry on with their job. If it's good security, people don't even know it's there. But it will affect us every day. It could be, as simple as getting your mail in the post, having a secure letterbox. It could be. For example, I had a cold call that happened to know everything about my house, the age that it was, work that was done to it, and I'm thinking, how did they get that information? So it can affect you personally, and it tends to be situations like that grab people's attention. So it's a global issue, but until you actually make it personal to the individual, people don't necessarily relate to it. And I see this in the news. Good stories about security in journalism tend to be ones that people can relate to personally. Personal journey.
So then how do we create that relation? Because as you were describing, I like the postbox actually. Never made that connection. Mail through a postbox. Yeah. No one touches those postbox. It's a federal offence if we're in an American TV series, right?
Yeah.
But yet anybody could touch your mail server in reality. Imagine if we as public had to defend our mailbox on the corner and stand around it. But now you've got all these safeguards on your phone, in your work network, etc. But the point I was trying to lean in and find out from your perspective is X amount of years ago, when you started, it felt like, and the pun is intended here, security was hiding behind a firewall, right? Everybody just let the firewall do its job, all that analogy of things happening back there, it's been dealt with.
It just happens, it just works,
But you're beginning to make me think that actually this is something we all need to be active in, right? Because you're speaking to customers. What's the change?
I don't think the principles have changed. You could go back to medieval times. The principles, the whole analogy about your castle and your moat. That defence in depth is an approach, but it's not. The most important thing, coming back to the people point, is even if you don't have the most mature security controls or model or process, if you have a good culture, people that are conscious about security, you have a better chance of surviving an attack and recovering from an attack. I've
got visions of this castle attack now, but that works for me. So no, but I like that.
So if you the castle analogy, it's the soldiers that are up on the parapet that are firing out the arrows. You have people that are well trained, well informed, know that they should be looking in a particular direction, know their role, know when to say, hey, I need to raise this to management. That is where your strengths are as an organisation, not just the technical controls. A lot of the time in workshops, it's talking about the process, what happens within an environment, but also what happens before, what happens after. What's the overall business position beyond just that? So it's context as well. And when you talk about context, it's often involving people or your supplier or your customer. Going back to the postbox piece, yes, the expectation is you get mail posted into it and you pick your mail up. But that doesn't always happen. It can get missing. It can reach the postbox and somebody takes it and not you. So things are designed in a certain way and are supposed to be used in a certain way, but if they can be used in a different way, that can be exploited, and that's one of the aspects of security and testing that you go through to validate this is normal behaviour. However, if I apply this scenario, what will happen? It's looking at maybe something that somebody hasn't thought about when they designed it, coming at it from a different perspective. Critical thinking.
Yeah, it's that chain of custody, I think is a phrase they use. Something moves from somewhere, you've got to make sure you can secure each vulnerable point.
Absolutely, from a transfer of information perspective, or an object, that you're supposed to be securing. Absolutely.
I like that, and I'm going to live on your castle for a little bit. So, I like the way you described. You've got people with bows and arrows. You've got people calling out if something's coming on the horizon, so there's a kind of control management happening in there. But in that castle analogy, I wanted to dig into my simplistic childish head, right? Is inside the castle there's still a village of people living. But it's very obvious that there's somebody with a bow and arrow putting their life on the line to stop it happening. It feels like, again, going behind that firewall, I'm going to trademark that if I say it one more time, but behind the firewall, people don't realize that you need to proactively know what this means to you, not the person holding the bow and arrow, because they're doing that. You're doing that defensive job with the customer, with the SOC, with the CISOs, but the rest of the business who are just living their life need to have a bit of connectivity. Yes. If
sometimes you don't know what's happening outside your walls, sometimes you'll carry on your business and everything seems fine and rosy. It's a sunny day. And the unsung heroes are the security team that are fixing an incident, keeping the lights on. On the flip side of that, we are bombarded with information on our phones, on our TV, and sometimes that means that people switch off and they go to their normal platform where they've got all the information that's related to what they like, whether that's cakes, cars, tea, coffee, whatever it is, and they just involve themselves in their world. Trying to get a message about security just to break through to that can be a challenge, particularly when there are multiple media channels now. The lifestyle now is not about having a castle, it's multifaceted.
There were less options back then.
There were so many options, so many personas. I wouldn't say life's more complicated than then because the principles are the same, but I'd say that there's more. There's more of everything, and then I think from a human perspective, sometimes we might just shut down and say, okay, I just want to focus on this.
Too many distractions, so you go back to that comfort pattern. But you've touched on that human part, that human conversation. So I'm beginning to like the separation between, look, there's as much tech as you can have, but at the end of the day, if the people aren't doing the right things, that support structure from technology is almost useless, isn't it? But then, so when you go into a new delivery, a new project, a new business, a new partner you're working with, wherever it might be, what's that first bit feel like? Because my assumption was, and as harsh as it sounds, most people haven't got a Scooby what they're talking about. They come in thinking they know the answer. Where does that journey open for you? How much of it is split? Where do you need to help the people realise what needs to be done here?
It depends.
You're picturing a customer in your head almost. I can see it. Talk about them.
Sometimes a customer can come in and talk to you, and they can be very succinct, and they can say, "Look, I've got this problem with my access control, and I know that this user group, they don't ever listen to me, and I'm always getting tickets from them because of X, Y, and Z problem." But sometimes it can be much more abstract, where they know that they've got some symptoms, they don't necessarily know why, or they don't know how to resolve it, either locally or globally, because sometimes you're talking about multifaceted change that affects lots of different business units, for example. And I try and break it down into different parts and understand, say, one part is related to the people's identity and another part is related to where their location. So just pulling something apart and understanding all of the aspects to it, and then coming back to what's the outcome we're trying to get to here. There's obviously pain experienced here. How do we get to the point where the customer is comfortable again, that business is normal, or at least to the normal they want, because normal is just a throwaway comment. For one company the maturity may be this, and for another company the maturity is this. And just on that analogy, I did some business continuity assessments of a site. Now I've did it in different locations. One was more local to me, where I was assessing a site that had a jet backup generator. It was a diesel generator, huge thing next to a data center, fairly standard stuff. Another site I visited, it was much smaller, and I asked about the power, and it was basically I had to go back out to the hallway, and they had a generator. They ripped the cord and started it up physically. Both worked, but they were completely different risk scenarios and different approaches. So every customer, I would say every customer scenario has similarities but differences, and that's why I say it depends, because you may have the general control approach, say confidentiality, but how that's applied in a different environment depends upon the technology they've got, the people involved, how well they're trained, the customer. Is the customer educated? When you go onto a website, does it actually brief you about the process? Do you understand your rights, consumer rights? There's a whole aspect of knowing the life cycle piece around a particular process. It's not just about saying, I keep getting these problems with my customer and I need to fix these GDPR issues. But it's understanding, okay, well, why is that? Are you talking to your customer? Have you got the right information that you're giving to them so they know their rights? No, okay, you need to brief your customer better. This is not a technology problem, this is a business problem. So it's understanding all of the parts, and that conversation can meander. That's also why it doesn't take 5 minutes.
Never takes 5. Because then it's multifaceted, right?
Yeah.
And you've got me stuck on this castle. And I suddenly thought, as I was listening to you're not going to be able to shift the castle, so that's the business. They're there. They're in their landscape, which starts to reflect on the unique things. So how much of it is like, you could obviously walk up to one castle and go, look, you just don't have a moat. That's exactly why you're getting hammered at the door.
Yeah.
Stick a moat in and the drawbridge. That will help you initially straight away.
Yeah.
You can't have 100 archers here because you can't afford them. So we need to come up with a smarter way of doing this.
A workaround, absolutely.
Yeah, and then also, yes, this looks exactly like a castle I did before, but actually it's slightly different. You've got woods behind you, you've got a higher mountain in front of you, so it's never going to be the same. No. You can have similar approaches. It comes back to principles, security principles, I think. Need to know, need to use. For example, list me out. Give me some of those key principles.
I was just as an example. Need to know. So, does this person need to know this piece of information? Yes or no? Do they need to use this information? So, is it the fact that they're informed, or is it the fact that they're actually supposed to be responsible for doing something with that information? So, it's people and process, procedural aspects. The same with a system. So, a system is an entity, is a persona. So does this information need to reside on this system? Does this system interrogate it? Is this system making decisions for the customer based upon this? Is it automated? How detailed is it? What is the qualities around that? What's the integrity? So you go from confidentiality, integrity, availability. And on availability, everybody talks about security, about confidentiality, integrity, but not that often about availability.
Go on, give me a bit more explanation on that.
So security stopped me from doing something. That's often the analogy, but they never talk about the fact that security has enabled me to have a system that works all the time.
Apart from that one time you got stopped for 5 seconds because there was a reason for that.
Yeah, exactly. It's always as a negative. And coming back to the risk management is often talked about in terms of negatives. What's the impact of the organisation in a negative sense? But what's the opportunity if we do business here? Yes, it's an environment that has risks, but if we mitigate them to a certain level, we're actually going to make revenue, or we're going to have a great relationship with the customer, and it's going to change the way that our business works. So it's risk versus reward, and that's sometimes also something that's not talked about.
Listen, I'm with you. My favourite point was actually there's no such thing as a negative risk, and people look at you sideways, or they look at me sideways and go, what do you mean? I said, well, as long as every risk sits under a clear objective, then the outcome of managing that risk is always a positive thing. you will achieve your objective. So if your objective is to not lose your IT systems, to not lose your people or data, then your objective is to be a successful business in whatever paraphrasing it is.
And coming back to your castle analogy.
It was yours, but I've stolen it. Well played.
Well done. It can be, from a risk decision perspective, I don't want to do business. So I'm not going to have that castle there. I'm going to have this castle over here.
Okay.
So you completely change the whole scenario. So it's about risk appetite as well.
But you need to make that consciously and not because something happened that you couldn't control.
Absolutely. It's the informed decisions, and that's good business, let alone good security. So I see AI as another persona, another person, as part of the chain, whether that's chain of custody or another aspect. It's a supportive tool, or a hostile entity.
Yeah, your knight in shining armour could also be the enemy.
Yeah, the villain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.